The views expressed in the following program do not necessarily represent the views of this station or its management.
Real People, Real Life is brought to you by these fine sponsors.
Welcome back to Real People, Real Life. We have Joe, and Don here today, and we've got our special guest, Carl Peterjohn from Sedgwick County Commission. Carl, tell us a little bit about yourself and then right into the subject.
Well, I'm a Sedgwick County Commissioner. I have been since January of 2009, Don, and I've been involved in a whole variety of issues, but we spoke most often about the whole sustainability, Agenda 21, and federal grant issue. So I'd be happy to visit about that or any other county business that everybody else wants to talk about.
Well, let's start with Agenda 21, and I know there's a big blow up here in Sedgwick County back 2011, 2012. Maybe you could kind of fill us in.
Well, the federal government's been offering grants, and there's almost a zillion different, is that a real number? A zillion different
It is now.
federal grant programs out there. But one of them has been what's called sustainability grants. They're through a combination of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, EPA, and Department of Transportation at the federal level. But they interact with other entities, and there's a long history. We could talk about this at the local level in terms of the local involvement, the federal level, and the United Nations international level.
Well, let's back up just a moment then and kind of bring our audience up to speed on Agenda 21. Now, contrary to belief, this did not start underneath Joe's big good buddy, Mr. Obama. However, it actually goes back, way back, to the 80s, doesn't it?
Well, it goes back decades in terms of the international discussions that led to Agenda 21 and the whole sustainability movement. And sustainability, I think, is an interesting word because I don't think it's something we really shoot for. I mean, I think of that wonderful speech that it's the movie, the Oscar-winning movie Patton, where he says, I don't want to hear anybody talking about holding our positions. Well, I view sustainability as kind of holding our position. I mean, the state motto is to the stars through difficulties, and ad aspera. I think we should do better than just trying to sustain or sustainability. I think we're trying to improve and grow and prosper. And that's the interesting.
At what point is regression actually the improvement, though?
Well,
if we were to
regression,
get back to common freedoms of the Constitution, a lot of this stuff goes away, and that creates the improvement by going back to our roots.
Well, you won't get an argument in terms of federal grants, in terms of taking us back to our roots. I mean, we have a Constitution, and I've been told that it's available to anyone around the world, and some people have joked about the fact that we can easily provide it since we don't use it anymore.
And we got spare copies. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So 1992 seems to be a key date in Agenda 21. Why?
Well, there was conferences, I believe, down in South America.
Rio?
Yeah, and at Rio, and at that point, Don, they basically came up with a template, and they've gone to a point now where it's Rio plus 20.
Okay.
And the whole effort has been built to try and get governments to buy in to the whole, quote, sustainability movement. And we're doing that here locally, but the local side of it's been very interesting because in 2010, when this first came up in front of the county commission, the county commission rejected it on a 3-2 vote. And we had a lot of discussion because the city of Wichita jumped in and said, well, wait a minute, if the county doesn't want to do it, we'll jump in and do it. The Fed said, no, if you don't want to bite from this apple, you got to go back to the end of the line. And when the issue came up again in 2011, we'd had 2 new commissioners added, and 2 of the commissioners who'd voted against it in 2010 were replaced by Commissioners Skelton and Ranzau. And Commissioner Ranzau, who's the most educated advocate on this subject, he's done a tremendous amount of work on it, voted against it, as I did, and I had voted against it in 2010. But Commissioner Skelton joined the other two commissioners, and we voted 3-2 to take it, and that started the planning process grant. Now, what makes this interesting, Don, is we're going to be looking at the implementation grant, whether we go forward with it, sometime in about the next, I think sometime next year.
2015 is the date that I saw, yeah.
Yep. And so we've got that going forward in terms of whether we will take the next step. But this is going on all over the United States. It's not just here in South Central Kansas. This is going on and all over the United States, and local units are making those decisions, Don.
Is that why I can't fix my property?
Well, you can fix your property. In fact, we at the county level like you to do that, because especially if you take out a building permit, we'll come out and reappraise you too. Some folks, we could use an increase in taxable assessed valuation in Sedgwick County.
City of Wichita doesn't think so.
I can't speak for the city. I'm a county
You're a
official,
county guy, right?
not a city guy.
I can't replace.
So this is
100 years
actually,
worth.
we've adopted, and the Sedgwick County Commission has adopted this sustainability.
Well, what
thing.
we did was we are the local entity that kind of is the contact point for the federal agencies for this grant, Don. And so we're in the situation where REAP, which is a group of counties and cities in South Central Kansas, have taken it on.
Was that
They've
REAP?
renamed it
REAP.
REAP.
Okay.
The Regional Economic Area Partnership, I believe,
Okay.
is the acronym. I'm about
I'm
98%
thinking of
sure
Grim
on
Reaper
that.
for some reason.
But REAP has I think there are about 18 or 20 governmental bodies, cities, mostly cities. There's some counties, and they basically are in the process of overseeing this whole grant process during the planning stage.
Well, what we've,
Well,
go ahead.
what does that mean to me, just your average person? You know, like, what does Agenda 21 mean to me? Like, how many aspects of that is it going to affect, are going to affect my life? What should I be worried about?
Well, in terms of for the average citizen at the moment, fortunately not much, but when you get to the implementation phase, this planning part is they're trying to get input, which if they've used a very flawed methodology. I like to call it the literary digest approach, but I'll leave that longer story aside. But the Agenda 21 has the potential in terms of saying, look, we think people are using too much energy, for instance, and so we need to have folks ride bicycles and take the subway to work. And if you live in a part of the country where you have temperature extremes and there's no subway, we've got to get you into the
People
buses.
are secondary to nature, and you need to be cattle instead of freedom.
Well,
Oh, wait, I'm hearing sounds
We're
here.
spoiled sorts here, are we Americans? I don't know that you're going to get us talked into taking a bike.
well, what do you mean?
We could ride in
We've
a
got the
truck.
government has banned incandescent light bulbs.
Yeah.
And they've changed our toilets.
I know. I'm going
Yeah.
blind from that. Literally, it affected my vision. Those dim.
And the irony is supposedly for the environment, we came up with these fluorescent light bulbs that are
They're
filled with
even worse.
mercury.
They're
Yeah.
full of mercury.
Yeah, which is highly toxic.
The cleaning process for cleaning up a broken
That'll get
fluorescent
me on my
bulb.
lead paint suit.
yeah, have you
Yeah.
ever seen the
Yeah,
cleaning
it's
process for that?
crazy.
It's like
Break out the hazmat suit.
exactly
So
hazmat
what-
has
Call
to come in.
WFD and stand back.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to say it, I'm from that older generation that they gave us in my junior high school biology class, when we went out to catch butterflies. They give us mason jars filled with carbon tetrachloride, which of course
put 'em-
which falls into that same category like mercury. And of course, we in chemistry class, everybody shined up their dimes with mercury.
Yeah.
I mean, we had bottles of the stuff. They just
I
said,
used
don't
to handle
inhale,
it in
Oh,
my
yeah.
hand.
don't inhale the fumes.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your question, which is a serious question, deserves,
Right.
you can get onto the flippant side of this a little bit, but some of it is so ridiculous, you've got to make fun of it, because otherwise
Yeah.
you cry over where we're going.
But is it serious?
The idea is that people, we're using up too much of the Earth's resources. So the idea is we need to live closer together, more compact. I think a few years ago, a little over a decade ago, I was in Siberia, and I think the type of living that those folks have to endure, and I'm not talking about the weather, I'm talking about the typical flat, as they'd call
Yeah.
it, or apartment. I mean,
Their
you're
housing
talking like
conditions.
5 meters by 5 meters. So
Really?
I mean, we'd call it maybe an efficiency, but But I talked to a university professor over there, and she told me that she had her own toilet in her flat, and she had her own kitchen too.
Wow.
So it was really
That was exciting for her.
Well, compared to
She's
some of the
living high on the
others that
hog.
were
My
out
goodness.
there. But
Communal living, the way the Eaton used to be laid out, it had common restrooms, and there's areas in apartment buildings overseas where there's common restrooms, there's common kitchens.
I seen that movie. It's called Hostel.
Yeah.
We call it. We have
Hostel.
similar buildings here in the United States, which are called prisons.
Yeah.
That's right.
So right now, to bring us into the next subject, I mean, right now we're then at the nudge stage, right? We're just being nudged to go a certain direction and getting.
well, it's an ongoing process because you've got an international aspect from it being pushed
Yeah.
out of the United Nations, but we've also got the push coming out of Washington, and that's direct. And when they're providing the money, you know, you're going to dance to the tune of the person who pays the piper, and the federal funds coming in. The real key would be in the implementation side and what comes out of it. And we're in this planning process where they're talking about getting public input on a variety of issues, and that's an area where this collective decision-making approach struggles.
Why is federal money so important that we need to sell our freedom for it?
Well, it's one of the reasons I voted no.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
What should I be worried about the next step that's coming? What?
Well, I urge you to get in touch with your local officials. If you happen to live in West Wichita, the western part of Sedgwick County, I'm your county commissioner. But I'd also, if you're in Wichita, contact your council members because Wichita is part of REAP. But if you're also in suburban Sedgwick County, most of the smaller communities here in Sedgwick County also have REAP memberships too.
How do I get Wichita to let me fix my building?
I've
Well, there's a
already
city
been-
council election next April.
There
I'm
is,
so
yeah.
mad at them people
There's a
that
meeting
gets
tomorrow.
these
They had a tremendous meeting this
Filing
morning at
deadline's
9
in
o'clock,
January.
as a matter of fact, at City Council. The place was packed. A lot of
Well,
talk
there'll be a
that
big city council meeting on and
next Tuesday, too, just
Well,
like it was today.
Well, yes,
Every
Tuesday.
The lead paint issue I see is
Yeah.
falling squarely into this whole discussion because any building prior to 78 was painted with lead paint, so now they want lead paint specialists. They want it encapsulated. They wanted all this boogeyman over lead paint because toddlers were chewing on paint because they had a vitamin or mineral deficiency, and they're out there eating dirt to this day for the same reasons. But there's
think we
nobody
should
that
ban
can make
dirt.
a buck competing with
I
dirt.
think we are.
So now we've banned lead paint, even though our founders played with lead toys and ate their food shot with lead shot. Lead's this big boogeyman now. It's all bad things lead, even though it doesn't really hurt anybody. It's an insanity that goes to this control issue that Agenda 21's all about. But it always lines somebody's pocket. That's the amazing part. There's somebody that got rich selling paint that's an alternative to lead-based paint. So,
So you mentioned some other issues in Sedgwick County we should be paying attention to besides this. What are they?
Well, within the next week from Wednesday, we're going to be voting on our 2015 budget, and that's a big deal. We've got about
Yeah.
a little over $400 million budget. We've got over 2,600 full-time county employees, and it covers everything from. We have our own fire district, which boundaries a little bit different from Sedgwick County. It doesn't cover Wichita, but it covers a lot of the suburban areas and rural areas. We've got EMS, emergency communications, 911. We've got all the record keeping. I mean, you talk about owning property. You buy a house, register of deeds. We keep track of that in the clerk's office and obviously the appraiser. So we're in a situation where this is also true for the cities and for the school districts. And so it's important for anyone watching this out here, contact your elected officials. Let them know what you think in terms of what you're happy and what you're not happy about. I mean, I tell people my door is always open, and I keep a regular old-fashioned landline listing. Maybe this makes me a 20th century troglodyte, so that if people want to get a hold of Commissioner Peter John, that Peter John's right there in the phone book.
How do you find out who your city officials are?
That's a good question. 660-7104 is the phone number for the election commissioner's office, and that's a county function too. And the election commissioner's office can tell you. You just basically call in and give them your name and address, and they can tell you who your elected officials are.
we're going to have to wrap it up right there. Pay some bills. We'll be back shortly with our next segment. Thank you for watching us here at Real People, Real Life.
Absolutely.
People, Real Life is brought to you by these fine sponsors.
Real People, Real Life, going on location. Thanks to Mid-America Power Sports. And Go Pro 4, now at Mid-America Power Sports, 333 Northwest Street, Wichita, Kansas, America.
At Trailer Town, we're all about selection, service, and safety. Trailer Town Selection, hundreds to choose from, small to large, lightweight aluminum to heavy-duty steel, all types, new and used. Trailer Town Service, the best in the Midwest, from wiring to axle repair. Trailer Town Safety, yes, we do Department of Transportation inspections. Trailer Town, trusted, family-owned, 301 West 53rd Street North.
Credit King Auto Sales is getting better all the time. We're doing it better. We're doing it better all the time.
Credit King Auto Sales, the king of buy here, pay here. Bad credit, no problem. The King specializes in getting you in the ride you want, no matter the credit score. Credit King doing it better all the time with the largest selection to choose from in all price ranges at one location. The King's Corner, 31st Street South and Broadway, Kansas' biggest buy here, pay here. GoCreditKing.com.
Sal's Japanese Steakhouse, 6829 East Kellogg Drive. A Wichita tradition for awesome dining and always a great time. Enjoy our Monday to Thursday specials, including half-price chicken and shrimp dinners. Sal's is open 7 days a week. Come in, relax, and let us give you the treat of fine dining and good fun in a beautiful atmosphere. From our family to yours, Sal's Japanese Steakhouse, 6829 East Kellogg, Wichita, Kansas.
Welcome back to Real People, Real Lives. And we're back on Agenda 21, and we had left last segment with at a very interesting point. Carl, if you could get back where we were at.
Well, I touched base a little bit on the future because there are ongoing meetings on a monthly basis. We've converted the sustainability is now called the Prosperity Project, because prosperity is much more politically correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I love prosperity.
I mean, everybody's in favor. Who's against prosperity?
Right.
And they realized that they had a marketing problem with sustainability. They hired a consultant, brought in the consultant. The consultant said, let's call it prosperity instead of
They're not progressives, they're liberals. No, we're progressives.
We're Marxists. But it's the whole view in terms of the collective. Whether we should we make decisions on an individual basis and have some responsibility for making those decisions and have some ability to fail? I'm a firm believer that we have this environment where nobody's allowed to fail anymore, and so nobody corrects mistakes. It just continues.
Our single greatest teacher.
And I've learned a lot more from my failures than from my successes, and I think that's true for most folks. But
absolutely.
But having said that, when you've got a fairly complicated, you've got a lot of different participants. This is part of a much bigger whole in terms of these grants, and I think the real key will be in terms of implementation. So it's something that folks need to be stay tuned over, because when the EPA is involved, for instance, I mean, we can't build a power plant out in western Kansas
EPA
anymore.
is Environmental Propaganda Agency.
Yeah, something like that.
I thought it was platypus.
Something like
I think it is.
Okay.
Okay.
But between the Department of Transportation, HUD, and EPA, however we're going to call it, they all have a role in it. But the accountability and responsibility. I mean, if this thing falls flat on its face, and I think it will in the long run, but who's going to have ownership of it?
Yeah.
Because you've got REAP with all the different cities and counties who are involved, kind of at the forefront, and Sedgwick County's at the forefront as long as we're kind of the agency helping direct the grant to REAP and being the direct contact point with
There
the
was a
feds.
nation that had this similar program about 80 years ago, and their organization just had one name. It wasn't HUD, EPA, and DOT. It was Gestapo.
Well, we have good in government. We have good intentions. Now, there's limitations on that, like I pointed out, because I resent the heck out of the fact that we had to stock up on light bulbs because you couldn't get them otherwise, and we had these light bulbs that they said, oh, they're going to be much better and they're much more expensive. They weren't much better.
They were more expensive.
And they were more expensive, and they didn't last any longer, and the light was funky, and
exactly.
And so you end up in the situation where you go, wait a minute. There's a wonderful book out there called Extortion by Peter Schweitzer, talking about how Washington, whether it's the political class or the bureaucratic class, are basically engaging in acts that, if it would occur in the private sector, would be considered extortion. And I recommend the book highly. It's been one that's been on my reading list for quite a while. But when you have a federal grant come to you, you then give up some of your ability to operate underneath it. And that's been a big problem for us, which is one of the reasons why we've had some battles at the county level over it. And it's a big issue between some of the folks who are running in today's election.
So is this reversible?
Well, hopefully it is.
Well, I know some states
before it causes too much damage.
Well, in the reading that I've done in the last, who knows how long, but at least in the last week, the key word that stands out to me is that it is a non-binding contract between countries with the UN. Well, I'm not a big fan of the UN. Do you guys want to see little blue helmets running around your neighborhood?
Targets?
Probably not.
No, I mean, it's not what I want to see. And this is the United States of America. This is not the United States of the United Nations.
Yeah.
They want to have the European Union. They can have the European Union. They can have their euro. We will still have our dollar, no matter how devalued it may be. It's still my dollar that I take home with my paycheck. The UN talking about, maybe you can answer to this, maybe you've got a little bit more knowledge into it. I mean, straight from the UN document, where the United States and all other countries would turn over their military might to the United Nations, and the United Nations would hold all military power as a result of the United States and others turning over their military might. And it's disarming everything. I mean, it allows us to have a defense force, kind of like we and the United Nations allowed Germany and Japan to have, a defense force, or to maintain or corral the cattle, so to speak, the people.
Well, the aspect that we've had on the sustainability grant hasn't gotten in the Department of Defense involved on any level that I'm aware of. But I would say that there's a tendency for government to grow unless there's some strict restrictions on its ability to generate revenue. And sadly, when governments fail, all too often the solution is more government. I mean, we had a regulatory failure that led to the Great Recession in 2008, and the inability of the federal government to keep track of all these entities that they're supposedly regulating.
Yeah.
And so the solution was we'll pass Frankendodd legislation, and we'll add several thousand pages that nobody can understand. We're putting community bankers out of business. We're expanding too big to fail banks, and we're in an environment where we are going to have more government bureaucracy than we've ever had before. And so, and of course, this happened in the 30s too.
So should we buy stock in, Georgia Pacific because of all the paper they're going to use?
Well, Georgia Pacific's
more
not
government
public.
does mean more.
Georgia
More
Pacific
paperwork.
is not a public company, so
They should go to work for you.
there's no way. So you can't pick that one out. But with computers, we're supposed to be going paperless, and I don't know whether I wouldn't hold my breath on the paperless side from government, but
Right.
So they know about the EMP and stuff, so I mean, you never know. You can lose it all in a split second.
well, that's a whole different topic for another day.
It absolutely is.
But real quick, I was going to ask you a question, and I know this sounds uneducated, but I am unfamiliar with what REAP is. Should I know, the average Joe, should I know what REAP is?
Well,
And
I think
does it affect me?
I think it's important because of regional government, and because it,
What?
What? Did I miss something?
God.
Yeah.
No, but when you ask the question, when you've got regional governments coming together, and sometimes you've got folks who aren't necessarily part of it, there's a distinction that gets blurred between the public sector and the private sector, because this is an entity that doesn't have statutory authority. The counties, the school districts, and the cities, we're all creations of the state of Kansas. We operate under state law. We don't have any authority on our own. REAP is kind of a voluntary entity of local governmental bodies, and they have as much authority as they're able to acquire either formally or informally through whatever role they're able to play. They've been involved in administering the Fair Fares program for several years in terms of the subsidized airfares here at Mid-Continent Airport, well, now Eisenhower Airport. Yeah, so, to get back to your question, it's a real question of where the responsibility and accountability lie, because if this program fails in the way that I think it's likely to do, and the money will be wasted, and if we won't get positive results, who's going to be held accountable?
The taxpayer.
No, they'll get the bill, but
we'll get the bill, accountable for the bill.
That's the only accountability there is. Government by nature is to restrict. That's a governor on an engine restricts its ability to overrun. That's what government does.
But
the only people ever held to account when government fails is the taxpayer, those who support the government.
So Agenda 21 is an international program in scope, but yet it's being implemented at the local level, at the regional
Through
level.
REAP?
Well, here locally, we're using REAP as playing a key role in this. But there's a tremendous amount of information online, and if your viewers, and you ask, how can people get more informed?
Absolutely.
I'd urge them to look at that information that's available online. Do their own research. There's some controversy on it, and there's some back and forth in terms of how much impact it has. And some folks have said, hey, there's going to be military aspects to it. But the real focus I have at this point is my concern. I think back to what Abraham Lincoln said back in the 1830s about, that Napoleon and all his armies could never get a drink from the Ohio. But if we really ran into problems, it would be something we did internally on our own, and so we're in a challenging, I think it was President Reagan who said, "You're only liberty is only one generation from losing
extinction."
Yeah. As we found out last week with Common Core, we're quickly going to get rid of that knowledge that we've all possessed of our founders.
And that's really scary, because that's something that Common Core brought to light, is that I think they're trying to dumb us down. And I think that this goes along with it, this Agenda 21 on trying to take, basically being able to be self-reliant away from.
When you have propaganda books like Howard Zinn's Ridiculous History of the United States as a textbook, another sorry Marxist. There is an effort in terms of dumbing down. Dinesh D'Souza's book America is a wonderful antidote for anyone out there who is interested in reading.
What book was that?
America
also
by Dinesh D'Souza. And there's the movies out there
right
too.
Okay.
And the book is too. It's on top of the nonfiction bestseller
Excellent.
list.
Now, I always thought that Groucho Marx and his brothers were the greatest, but this Carl guy, I don't know. See, Sam, you're a good Carl, but that other Carl, that's so much.
He was the bad cousin.
He was the bad guy.
Real People, Real Life is brought to you by these fine sponsors.
At Economy Motors, we've got your back. We are the home of Easy Pay. At a time when everything costs more, not with us. Everything, all makes, all models are still priced $12,995 and under. Great selection and adding more every week. Now is the perfect time to come in and take your pick with just $100 to put the car of your choice in layaway. Bad credit, no worries. We are here to help you. Economy Motors, 2305 South Broadway.
Economy Motors, we got your back.
Knapp Weaponry is the home of Wichita's newest indoor temperature-controlled shooting range. Mention this ad for 2-for-1 pricing weekdays from noon to 4. Knapp Weaponry is an NRA Business Alliance member that offers NRA and state-certified instruction classes, training, and women's unarmed self-defense classes. We buy and sell new and used guns and offer gunsmith services. Knapp Weaponry offers a free range session with the purchase of a new gun. We also offer transfer services and an array of ammo. Knapp Weaponry, the West Side's best-kept secret.
Hammond Liquor, home of the coldest beer in town and the lowest prices store-wide. For all your special events, your friends at Hammond Liquor have what you need, from beer, wines, spirits, champagne, and more. Open till 8 p.m. every Sunday. Hammond Liquor, West Kellogg and Tyler Road.
Credit King Auto Sales is getting better all the time. We're doing it better. We're doing it better all the time.
Credit King Auto Sales, the king of buy here, pay here. Bad credit, no problem. The King specializes in getting you in the ride you want, no matter the credit score. Credit King, doing it better all the time with the largest selection to choose from in all price ranges at one location. The King's Corner, 31st Street South and Broadway. Kansas' biggest buy here, pay here. GoCreditKing.com.
Real people, real life, going on location. Thanks to Mid-America Power Sports. And Go Pro 4. Now at Mid-America Power Sports, 333 Northwest Street, Wichita, Kansas, America.